All right, good afternoon, everyone. So this session is about fortifying fraud prevention. Right, so we assembled this great panel here. We're super fortunate to have such a diverse and extensive background from the panel here. I'll ask the panels in a little bit introduce themselves about what they do. But definitely we want to share more about strategies and solutions on how to fight fraud and protect your customers and your company. Right, so not only are we going to talk about high-level challenges, we also hope to share some of the hard-learned lessons that we have, right, so that we can all benefit. Because in this business, rising tide lifts all boats. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to quickly introduce our panels here. So we have Shivinja Pandey. He's a principal machine learning engineer from Vanguard in the asset management industry. And we also have Sarah Amanda O'Keen. She's CRO and steering committee member from 100 Women in Finance. And we also have Shreya Francis, head of technology innovation at Far Mutual Re. And last but not the least, we have Devarat Shah, co-CEO and co-founder of Ikigai Labs, and professor of AI at MIT. So please join me in welcoming our panelists here. All right, so next I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves in terms of what they do, specifically also talk about what kind of challenges from business and fraud aspect either you or your customers, your clients are facing. So we'll start with Devarat.
All right, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Thank you everyone for coming here. As Will mentioned, I'm a professor at AI at MIT. I'm also founder of Ikigai Labs, and hopefully whatever I tell you, I don't tell you is exciting. Do stop by our booth, which is just opposite 143. All right, so very quickly telling you about myself. So I've been teaching statistics, machine learning, or AI for past 19 years now at MIT. Sorry? Mic's not on. Mic's is not on, so what did I do? How about now? See, used to teaching in large classrooms and then make loud noise, so I thought I'm already on mic. Okay, great. Thank you, though. So I teach AI. I'm also a founder of a company called Ikigai Labs. What do we do really at Ikigai Labs? All of us have learned about or know about ChatGPT, the large language models. They're amazing at extracting insights, patterns from text. What we do large graphical models. They're amazing at extracting patterns from tabular and/or timestamp data. Think of that as a large box or large high-dimensional cube, both in time and space, lots of spreadsheets, time-stamped. We go and learn sort of patterns from it. And that can do a ton of interesting things. Such as doing pattern matching not just at a numbers level, but pattern matching at the level of spreadsheets, schemas, and all that stuff. Now, what does that have to do with fraud? Because we are here for fraud, right? Well, one thing is, if suppose I came to you and I told you that I'm Devarat Shah, well, right now sort of Will has testified to you that I'm Devarat Shah and I'm at MIT, and hence, because you trust him, you don't worry that sort of I'm a fraudulent person here, right? Just the way we go to bank. In a physical world, there is an identity that we can verify. In digital world, that's very difficult. We can't verify that. There's only transaction coming to you. Well, you hope that the meta information associated with that transaction recorded somewhere else collectively provides you a global consistent view. To do that, what you have to do is you have to match patterns from multiple data sets together and then sort of do that in real time. And as you're doing that, maybe machine will learn a lot of things, but machine will make mistakes. So that's where you want experts to help provide feedback very quickly. That's the type of things that large graphical models can enable. That's the type of things that sort of can be very easily built as an end solution with the platform that we built. For example, before I came here, I'm actually loud right now because I got a nice boost as I was doing a demonstration of this exact thing a few minutes ago at our booth before. Now, this functionality, on one hand, it's very, very important for fraud. That is just understanding patterns, ability to stitch things together. But it also is very helpful for things like just a classical data reconciliation that shows up everywhere. If you think from fraud, from not able to just stitch things together, but other perspective of fraud would be that, hey, something that is unusual, again, having an ability to sort of say, this data point is not as rest of the data points. That's another place where you can both understand fraud, evaluate risk, and so on. So really, if there's one thing that I want you to sort of remember from this conversation is that a lot of data that matters to us is structured, tabular, time-stamped. Extracting patterns from it can help us do real-time fraud detection and many more things. All right, so with that, I will pass on the mic to my fellow colleague, Shreya here.
Thanks. So I'm very excited to be part of this panel. I'm the head of technical innovation at Pharmachilry, as Phil mentioned. As far as we are concerned in the insurance industry, there are different ways in which we observe fraud. Few instances that would help you understand how fraud can occur in the insurance industry would be, some people would stage accidents and file fraudulent claims. And then it's very difficult to understand what is right and what is wrong, right? So one possibility would be to go for predictive analytics, machine learning algorithms. For that, we need more data. So then it depends on the availability of data. One of the major issues that we have noticed is that occurrence of fraud is something that companies keep private. Right? So fraudsters would try to hack into different systems and different companies. They use different techniques. So unless and until we come up with a way to share these details anonymized, it's going to be incredibly difficult to come up with a generalized fraud detection system that could help everyone. And yeah, these are some areas that we are looking into right now. Other than that, I would say that one other point that I would like to note is that we always think that fraudulent claims come only from external sources. But this is also something that can happen internally within the company. So these are also areas that we have to look into when it comes to ethics and morals of the employees. So I think, that's it about me. I'll pass it over to Sarah.
Thanks so much. So my name is Sarah Amanda. I'm a Chief Risk Officer in Investment Management, and we work primarily with institutional investors, so fraud is hugely costly to us if things go wrong. I'm on a number of boards and report into a number of boards for all strategic risk, so fraud is obviously a huge strategic risk in our industry at the moment. And I've been fortunate to work in other roles in Big Four where I've advised governments and regulators on a number of strategic risks, including fraud. So I think it's impacting every industry in financial services, but I think for 2024, we see it as been the year of digital fraud. I think just with the advances in finance at the moment with, AI, the convergence, the industry convergence, embedded finance, open data, digitization of money, decarbonisation, digital identity, that fraud is huge, and it is both an internal and an external issue in companies. And in the last year alone, we've seen a 3,000% increase in deepfakes, as well as dramatic increases in digitally altered identities. So I think that is probably the most pressing issue for the industry at the moment, as I see it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Humbled to be a part of this panel, firstly. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shivendra. I go by Shiv. Please feel free to call me Shiv. Will already knows that. He works with me. Currently, I work as a principal machine learning engineer for Vanguard within the enterprise security and fraud department. So what's my role? To put in simple words, we fight fraud. It's as simple as that, literally. To elaborate on that, being in the finance game, working with an asset manager, fraud could happen at any point of a user's journey or a life cycle, be it the authentication side or onboarding side. When someone is getting onboarded, there are tons of bots which tries to create account and probably do micro deposit fraud at the time of transaction, post transaction, and even when people are talking to customer care representatives, they try to extract information from them by asking fraudulent questions. So within a user's life cycle and user journey, fraud could happen at any point of time. So again, going back to what I said, I fight fraud. But just AI ML is not a part of it. We work in a full stack team. AI machine learning is definitely a significant part of it. We also have case management systems, rules engine team, and also on the front line, we have fraud analysts who actually are the star of the show. We are just creating models. They are the ones who are dealing with the client request, and they are the ones who is actually justifying if some account is getting blocked, what is the reason of that block. Having said that, and going back to what Bill had asked us previously about the challenges, I mean the actual challenges that we face, I would like to approach that question from a different angle, and without talking about the fraud challenges in itself, which I touched upon barely. I would like to talk about what are the challenges that the fraud fighting team faces on a daily basis. It's a different angle. So I think one of the biggest challenge that we face right now is the need to keep switching and rotating our strategies to fight fraud. The reason I'm saying this is because we need to be right every time, but the fraudsters just need to be right that one time, right? So they keep on trying different combinations and routes in order to find any vulnerability within our systems. So the need to evolve our strategies and keep switching it's very high. I think that's a big challenge for a fraud fighting team. Apart from that, another classic challenge which has been there since the start of humanity is trying to balance the true positive and the false positive rate. And for us, it's even, this problem gets even worse because being a part of a data science team, we are always tempted to create the model with the highest accuracy or the highest true positive rate. But what ends up happening is our false positive starts taking a hit. And what it boils down to is the user experience is ruined. If you start blocking 5% of your good users, of course, you will start losing business. So it's a very big challenge for us. And last but not the least, one of the other big challenges that we face within being in a fraud fighting team is we have to be on the lookout 24/7. We have seen massive spikes in fraud attacks during holiday seasons, during weekends, and when everyone else is having holidays and celebrating or on their leaves, we are the ones who is awake, being a part of the operations team, and we are fighting fraud. So it's more personal, but I feel that is also a very big challenge for a fraud fighting team. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Yep. Thank you, panel, for sharing some of these big challenges, right, from user experience. Because if we turn away all the users, well, we don't need to fight fraud, right? We don't have a business at all. To these digital frauds, right? Synthetic identities, to stage accidents, to just trying to find things unusual, right? Mm-hmm. So these are super important. So I want to ask the panel in terms of, hey, during your work, right? Where do you see potentially new technology coming in, right? Since we're facing all these challenges, where do you see new technology? I mean, of course, our focus here is in AI/ML, right? So within or even outside of AI/ML, what are some of the new things you see can help us deal with these challenges, can help us prevent the bad guys from being successful? And I guess just how do you see your strategy of incorporating these new AI/ML technologies? And so we'll start with you, Shiv, since you have the mic.
Okay. Okay, I guess I'll just keep on speaking then. So in terms of technology, before I start talking more specifically about the evolving technologies and how they can be used and what we are leveraging, this a bigger fish to fry here, for a lack of a better term. What I would like to say is that technology is like a double-edged sword, right? Like there are always two sides to each technology. By that, what I mean is whenever a new technology or a groundbreaking technology takes birth, there are always two sides to it. There's a side of good actors, then the side of bad actors, and then there is a continuous race between them to customize it for their use cases. So this is a cycle which keeps on following. And a very simple example I'm sure we all are aware of is large language models. The commercialization of them definitely opened a lot of business and efficiency opportunities for the businesses. But at the same time, the use of LLMs for creating fraudulent contents or convincing phishing emails or modifying public opinion with fake news, the news of these things have been ever growing. So what it means is that the traditional methods that we have used in the past for fighting fraud, they have lost their effectiveness in some sense because they are not able to really differentiate between the true and the malicious content. So with that baseline, in terms of technology which we could actually use to fight fraud, broadly speaking, what we have seen and observed is AI tools combined with advanced analytic systems, biometric and multi-factor authentication system, and in some sense also blockchain are increasingly used to fight fraud. At the same time, more specifically speaking, what we have observed and proved is that AI and machine learning tools could be used for, let's say, anomaly detection and also real-time monitoring, be it on the authentication side or the onboarding side. We have used them, we have seen them, they actually work. It's really good. Apart from that, just one last point, what we have also observed and used are the graph-based technology for fighting fraud, especially on the onboarding side of the business. The reason is that they are very good at finding the implicit and explicit context and relationship between the clients, their activities, etc. And hence the use of graph-based system to flagging, let's say, a community of bad actors or tracking the origin of the attack, like who is the kingpin of this attack, it makes life very easy. So I think solution is not just one technology. I strongly believe that it is a combination of technologies, to put in simple terms.
Yeah, thank you, Shiv. Yeah, I was going to ask you, Sarah, Amanda. So
Yeah, thanks,
from
Shiv.
risk perspective, right? There's downside risk. We'll talk about downside risk in a little bit, but perhaps you can, I guess, add anything to potentially upside risk for new technology in fighting fraud. Anything from that perspective?
So I think the biggest risk that boards, executives, and organizations have in general in FS is trying to keep up to speed with the technological advances that fraudsters are using. And as Shiv mentioned there, it's a combination of technologies, and it is operating almost on a no trust basis, as in there's, you don't know who you can trust in the system, as was mentioned earlier. It's operating on that basis. And it's been ahead of technological advances across the board, not just in ML and AI. So that's a huge challenge. And I think, to use what you use there as a double-edged sword, what I tend to say is actually AI and ML is both a shield and a sword, because it's a shield to your business and you need to use those as part of fraud to detect risk and detect anomalies. But also it's a sword used against you by fraudsters, right, to be one step ahead. So I think, we're seeing a huge increase in use of ML, both structured and unstructured, and AI. And I think just back to kind of what I was speaking around biometrics, like multimodal biometric security. So looking at, say, veins on palms, your retina and your eye, kind of using different sources to ensure identity. Although, the challenge you have with those is as soon as we look at those new options for detection, fraudsters are kind of ahead of that, and they've come up with a solution for that. So it's a continuous cat and mouse race, really. So it is a huge challenge.
Right, thank you. That's great perspective. Now, Sharia, you have the title of head of innovation. So we're really curious to
Sure.
know what kind of
my
innovation
goodness.
are you thinking about
Oh my
that are
goodness!
down
Yeah.
the pipe?
No, I'm in a lot of pressure now. So yeah, I would say that there are lots of areas in the field of AI that we could make use of when it comes to new technologies. First and foremost, I would like to touch upon predictive analytics and machine learning, which is the basic area that we would look into if you want to detect fraud. One particular area that I would like to speak about would be ensemble algorithms, right? Like gradient boosted trees. Rather than going for one particular algorithm, if you can try, a mix of different algorithms, that would help when it comes to detecting fraud. Another area would be we also have to do real-time monitoring when it comes to fraud detection. So it's kind of online learning. So there are new areas in the field of AI like active learning, online learning. These are areas that we could look into if we want to focus on real-time monitoring for fraud detection mechanisms. And there are also algorithms like isolated forests that we could look into. Another area would be natural language processing, because especially when it comes to insurance, you have lots of unstructured data. So we would have to look into linguistic anomalies. We can rely on transformer-based models like GPT-3, and also we can rely on word embeddings and sentiment analysis mechanisms to detect linguistic anomalies. And I think just like you mentioned, blockchain, definitely. Blockchain would help in secure transactions. So that is one area wherein we can focus to avoid fraud. So there are lots of ways in which we can implement that via smart contracts, consensus mechanisms, and cryptographic hashing. These are things that we could look into. Another important area is explainable AI, because if we have to implement AI-based fraud detection mechanisms within any company, we have to explain it to stakeholders, right? So it's always good to have a team that have an understanding of explainable AI methodologies, so that, because it's very important to explain why we ended up making that decision, that this could be fraud, right? Because otherwise it can cause lots of issues. So there are lots of algorithms or approaches like SHAP, LIME for explainable AI. And another area would be definitely quantum computing, which we would be looking into at the finance stage, the last session. So that would help us to analyze large databases at a much faster pace than the current ML algorithms. So one of the main algorithms that I've seen people using is Grover's algorithm, and one of the frameworks that people use is TensorFlow Quantum. So yeah, I think these are some of the areas that I've seen, the application of new technologies for fraud detection. Yeah.
All right, that's great. Definitely give us a lot of ideas to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll turn to Deborah, right? You can occupy both the startup space and the academic space. So anything from new technology perspective you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, great insights. Thank you. And let me make sure this is on.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Learning from my mistakes. Three things I would like to say. Interrelated and in part sort of covered through various different sort of aspects that my colleagues presented here. So one is, it'll be useful to just start thinking from the, let's say, first principles, right? What is fraud? Okay, and again, going back to what is fraud as a question, fraud happens because we cannot verify a specific things in a context. That is, what we believe is the reason why something is happening is not the reason. Okay, it's like, I come and ask you for $100 and sort of you believe that I deserve it even though I don't, and that's when sort of it's a fraud basically. Okay, so if we think from that first principles perspective, really at the end of the day, it boils down to verification, identity verification. And again, there are various ways in which it would happen, whether it's a rule-based system, whether it's just the way we have these days multi-party authentication, whether you log in and you get an SMS and all that stuff. But those are few mechanisms that you can enable. But at the same time, if we were thinking from an AI perspective, maybe some of those mechanisms, even when they're absent, by gleaning across data sources that you have, both in time and space, I think that's one way to actually make that style of functionality better and better available, okay? So that's one thing I would say. Again, going back to trying to get as much as possible in terms of digital identity verification by creating a wider net by your ability to stitch as many data sources together as possible. So that's one. Going from an operations perspective, if you are sort of building a team or you have a team that's providing fraud detection solutions, no technology is perfect, no technology is complete. So you do, at the same time, many of these people, as you mentioned, analysts who are sitting in front and explaining and all that, they have a ton of information. They may not be AI expert, but they have a ton of information. So how do we enable these experts to provide their insights with the technological solutions that are available out there? That is, let's not have technology sitting on left side and people sitting on right side. Let's make people talk to the technology. We want to build AI systems with expert in the loop, as I would call it. So that will be the second thing. And then the third thing is, fraud or any such important operational challenge is not done by one group or one individual. It's cross-cutting in organization. For example, many of my members here represent, or colleagues here represent different parts of organizations. And on one hand, data scientists and AI team might build solutions, and analyst might implement it, and then maybe the person who is worrying about all sorts of finances of the company is trying to decide how the fraud solutions are implemented. Going back to the earlier comment you made, is that it's not about just false positive and false negatives. At the end of the day, it's about end decision and customer that you care about. But that needs to translate back into the type of rules you build. So one way to think about things like fraud is there's a trade-off that you have, right? There's a trade-off that you have. Again, going back to earlier comment that Will made, it's like one way to prevent fraud is to never let anybody do any transaction, period. Easy. Okay, but then of course there's no business. So the question is that what sorts of plausible trade-offs are there between different level of fraud that you achieve or different level of success you achieve and different level of sort of revenues you achieve? And then how do you constantly balance it? And AI technology has matured enough that you can look at your historical data and you can look at your collective solutions and try to produce these scenarios that can help you then say, well, I as a decision maker think that we should operate here, and maybe different parts of organizations then interprets that into their context, how operationally that translates into their day-to-day decisions, and then back. So I think that way we need to think of it holistically. So again, going back, three things. One is let's think of fraud as a problem holistically. Two, let's make sure that experts are not left outside of the technology, or just technology is on its own sitting outside. And the three is that sort of within organization, decisions should be made holistically, not individually.
Yeah, thank you. That is great. So let's double click on that topic, right? In terms of implementing these new AI ML technologies. So what are some of the potential gotchas or risks, right? From overall maybe establishing risk appetite to potentially some of the implementation level AI ML risks. So we'll see, so who wants to kind of talk about the potential risk side of the equation here? All right, Sarah, Amanda.
Thanks. It's on? Yeah. So I think you need to look at risk from a multiple perspectives here, right? So it's not just actually the fraud and the cost of that fraud, direct cost of fraud to your business. You're also looking at, and Shiv touched on earlier, trust. Like anti-fraud is a huge kind of trust piece with clients. So if you erode trust, through having a fraudulent activity, or even, you know, a false positive, right? And that can erode trust with a client as well. That's a huge challenge, and at times actually it's unquantifiable, right? And you know, I saw it in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. Trust arrives on a tortoise and it leaves bolting like a horse, right? So it's you know, you could have very, very long relationships that diminish very quickly with that. So I think, you know, when we look at risk, it's through multiple lenses, but I also think there's a huge risk around education and making sure that the wider organisation is educated, but then also what we are seeing from a synthetic fraud perspective is actually fraudsters target underrepresented populations and more youths in financial services. So that's actually becoming more than just a financial services, financial issue. That's actually becoming a social issue. So that's really important. And that's where I think education is also really important as well. So I think that, the board and executive will look at it not just from a financial perspective, but will look at it through multiple kind of social perspectives, but also kind of trust and a wider reputational perspective as well. So those three lenses. And I think that also as well is that lines are becoming more and more blurred between roles and industries and ecosystems. And that's really challenging from a risk perspective. But, you know, as a number of panelists have spoken, people can't operate now in silos. They can't, you know, engage risk after they've decided, you know, a technology might be a good fit. I think that risk, technology, multiple teams need to be involved at a strategic phase. And again, that is, you know, time, resources and money. The last thing we want to see is, you know, multi-millions been spent on a solution and then it comes to a board or risk or compliance and it's actually, this is outside of our appetite. So I think that there are some of the things, and then just education, I guess, widely across the organisation, because as was mentioned, fraud can be both an internal and external job.
All right, any reactions from the panel in terms of kind of potentially other angles of thinking about risk?
Actually, I would like to pick up on one thing she said, and I thought it's very consequential. As we think about new technologies coming in enterprises, organizations right now, and we are here at the AI Summit, so definitely everybody's thinking about the AI. I think education, as you mentioned, is extremely important, and not that I'm an educator and hence it's a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of a thing, but I think very, very important. So for example, times you would talk to somebody and if they're not necessarily AI, ML educated, they'll say, well, you're making a prediction, why is it not perfect? And at that time, there are two things that come to my mind. One is the Yogi Berra quote, right? That is, forecasting is really, really hard, especially about future. Of course, that's a joke, but the point is that if you do understand sort of how AI, ML technologies work, you know that exception is a norm, not exception. Now, what you do want to understand is that how often are you getting exceptions? It's like you go to a casino, and if you are able to sort of actually have odds in your favor, 51%, actually you're going to come out rich, just play long enough, right? It's not that sort of you need to be correct all the time. And how does one sort of understand that style of things so that as these solutions are integrated into the organization, everybody working with them, whether they are experts or not, they understand sort of certain basic nuances around it. It's like there was a time when we as a community went through education of how do you prepare slides and how do you send emails. Before that, we did not do that. And after now, everybody knows that sometimes sort of when sort of computer doesn't work, just switch it off and switch it on, right? So in a similar sense, I think prioritizing basic AI education in enterprises, I think will go a long way.
All right, thank you. So now we kind of laid out the potential risks. Any suggestions in terms of how we could mitigate some of these risks or work around some of these risks?
It's on? Okay. The Sega continues. In terms of any advice or suggestions, that we can definitely implement today or let's say in the next month. I could definitely talk about a few. Something which I want to piggyback on what Devrat said was having a holistic approach. What I mean by that is fighting fraud is not just deploying and implementing AI/ML solutions. AI/ML solutions and models for anomaly detection or real-time monitoring of unusual behavior and all that is definitely a significant part of it. Let's all be on the same page about that. But it's not everything. A good fraud fighting program, FFP, let me just call it FFP moving forward. A good FFP is a right combination of AI and machine learning models coupled with a very strong traditional rules engine, which knows for certain that if this IP is fraudulent, we have to block it. You don't need an AI/ML solution to tell you that if this IP is doing fraud, you don't have to block it. Like you don't need AI/ML for that. So it's AI/ML solutions coupled with rules engine, with a very strong case management system, with proper frontline fraud analysts in the loop because they are the star of the show. So that's definitely one advice. And other suggestion that I can give is have multiple lines of defenses. For example, you can have real-time monitoring using an AI model for transaction monitoring, but at the same time, you can also have a post-transaction monitoring layer, which could look at more sophisticated patterns, and it could actually find the community of bad actors that might have got filtered through the first line of defense. And we have seen this. Multiple line of defenses helps. Apart from that, something that I mentioned earlier was keep rotating and switching your strategy because the fraudsters are evolving, and so you would have to do that. And last but not the least, and probably it could be a panel discussion in itself, is have a proper strategy for building versus buying. The reason I'm saying that is because, of course, just look outside. There's so many vendors with amazing solutions. Ikigai Lab being one of them, Devrat. I'm selling for you. I have to get paid now. So there are so many amazing solutions out there. And if you really start trying to build everything from scratch, you will miss the train. So with that in mind, I would like to pass it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. So I love the way you framed this, right? So, yep, so we're...
Do you add something?
Oh, no.
Yeah, we just want to see if the panel members have any advice, right? Actionable advice for the audience here in terms of, hey, what you would advise the audience to go back and do maybe next week or next month. So that will be our last question here. Then we'll open up to audience if we have time. Yeah, Sarah, Amanda, anything you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I think, sorry, we're very short on time, so conscious want to leave it for Q&A. I think that Shiv wrapped it up pretty well there around, like, I think strategy is really, really key. I think that's really important that you have enough finances, right, to build what you need to build. So I think that strategy is really, really important. So I think you summed it up pretty well.
All right, thank you. How about you, Shreya? Anything you want to share?
I was just looking at the time. Do we have time? Oh, we have? Yeah. We have 4 minutes. Okay, sorry. Sorry? Oh, yeah, maybe sure, yeah. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, we'll see if the audience has any questions. Okay, so if not...
Okay. So then, yeah. One, if I have to give one advice, I would say it depends on where your company is right now, right? When it comes to fraud detection. So as someone who's getting started with it, I would advise to go back and look at your data, right? Usually I see data being very siloed, and you cannot, it's very difficult to implement fraud detection systems if you're going to depend on different silos. So creating a unified data lake would be something that you would have to look into. Would be the first thing you have to do. But if you already have that in place, then it would all be about investigating different technologies that you could make use of to come up with a good fraud detection strategy, discussing with stakeholders and different teams within the company, seeing to it that you gain their trust. And for that, it's important that we'll need to have people who can explain basic concepts in layman's terms, so that they will understand how could these technologies help, and that the fact that we would always have a human in the loop. Right? It's not always the machine getting things done. Even if if the machine says that there is some kind of fraud, we would always flag it. A high risk claim will be flagged, and then it's a human who would do the final investigation. And I think these are things that would help us in negotiating different technologies that we would like to implement, if you haven't already. And yeah, I think that would be it from my end.
All right, thank you. How about you, Deborah?
Well, I think we still have a minute and a half, and I'm not sure if any one of you have questions. Conversation would be awesome because you guys have been sitting here and listening to us. Please.
Hopefully you can hear me. Yes, absolutely.
So the question is, it's a little bit out there, but is there a possibility for a future where there is no fraud? And how would that look? What would it really take to get there?
I think highly unlikely, but I would like to pick up on something that Shiv said, and I was going to joke about it, is that if you are not in business here in fraud, find yourself in business in fraud, because it's going to be around, and it's like a way to keep yourself very busy. But I think more coming to my reasoning is that we're getting to a world where, and it's continuing, as digitization and more is coming, is we are finding ourselves into the world where lots of things are happening through multiple channels, multiple personas, multiple ways. Most, if not all of them, are virtual. And when things become virtual, there's a traditional way that we knew, which is physical, is disappearing, and that means that the party that authorize that these are the authenticate things are going away. Now, there's a whole question about the quotes unquote blockchain as a technology, and I have my strong opinion on that. But while that remains on one side, I think we're going to continue to see actually the proliferation of virtual world, and hence I think fraud is going to only increase.
All right, yeah, I think our time is up. So please join me in thanking the panel again.